Once again, I want to welcome everyone to the show. Before the start of each show, I like to introduce myself, especially to our new listeners. I'm Dr. Ava, internal medicine hospitalist. I have three children, ages 13, 10, 8, married 10 years to another physician. I'm also an author who wrote a book called Paging Dr. You, geared to those interested in going into the medical field. I'm the owner of Dr. Ava B Coaching with the goal of coaching future medical students. I will be hosting Help Moments with Dr. Ava for season 5 of the Hope TV. Help Moments with Dr. Ava is not just about having good health and giving medical information, but it's more of a holistic approach that will help you have a good and healthy life altogether. We keep it fun, we keep it interesting, and very informative. Remember that I will not be giving specific medical advice, but only general ones. So, as always, I recommend you seek the advice of your own personal doctor. So let's get into it. Today's show is about mental health and the stigmas in the Black community. Such an important topic, and I'm so glad we'll get to talk about it today. Growing up, I thought that therapy was only for people who were mentally ill. And if you went to therapy or counseling, you must have had problems. It's a common misconception for many communities, especially in the Black community. Instead of dealing with mental health and racial concerns through counseling and therapy, many Black and African Americans feel a stigma about mental health treatments and avoid seeking the proper treatment. Instead, what we try to do, we try to handle the ups and downs on our own by leaning on friends and family. We work on trying to just get through it because that's what strong people are supposed to do. Admittedly, I've tried this tactic countless of times. It wasn't until later in life as an adult that I realized that therapy is beneficial for everyone, including those who would consider themselves mentally stable, happy, and successful. And when you think about it, therapy shouldn't only be reserved for your life's upside down. Imagine how great it would be to have a clear awareness of who you are, why you are, and what makes you tick before your life is in a high stress situation. You'll be more equipped to spot a dicey situation early on, and you'll be able to deal with it calmly rather than waiting for it to escalate into a dramatic explosion. So, what if our culture didn't wait until we were adults to peel the layers of who we are and instead started with a more proactive approach to mental health during childhood? When children go to therapy, even if there aren't any foreseeable mental health problems, they learn the foundation of understanding and expressing themselves starting at a young age. Communication, especially communicating emotion, is exceptionally hard for kids, and the inability to do so usually results in frustration, tantrums, outbursts, and sometimes aggressive behavior. In counseling, children learn to recognize certain behaviors that, when either downplayed or fueled, can turn into unruly monsters, and that can impact their day. So they also learn to gain a better understanding of how they feel, how to feel calm, how to feel comfortable in social and family settings. At an early age, children gain a comfort of self awareness that can help them deal with many obstacles of the future. That being said, I'm here with a special guest that I want to introduce to all of you. Her name is Cornell Daniel Grishby, PhD. She's a doctor of philosophy and School of Psychology. She is a native born West Indian from the beautiful island of Dominica. She's an immigrant and first generation scholar, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts from Agnes Scott College, where she majored in psychology and minored in education. She then earned her Doctor of Psychology in School Psychology from Georgia State University. She is the founder, president, and CEO of Reach AKG Education Consultants, LLC. She currently serves children, families, and institutions, including individuals and communities of color, navigating their mental health journey, as well as individuals living with disabilities in both the public school system and in the private practice sector. She's passionate about using research and evidence-based strategies to acquire knowledge for generational growth, development, and advancement within marginalized populations. Welcome to the show. Can you tell the viewers a little bit more about you before we get started?
I mean, you did such a great job with that introduction, but I will see. So similar to you, I have three children as well. I've been married 7 years this year. We have a 5-year-old son and a 3 and 1-year-old daughter. So I'm a busy mom, working mom. So I understand that struggle. And also, like you said earlier, I had my own journey with mental health. So this is a very personal topic for me and something I'm really excited to talk about today. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's get right into it. So many people put off seeking help because they tell themselves that the problem isn't that bad. What is your take on this?
I think it makes perfect sense. I understand why people do it. We are often taught to normalize struggle, to normalize hardship, if you will. So as we go through things in life, we don't recognize when we shouldn't be struggling as hard as we are, and we think we can handle it because you see other people handling it themselves. They don't often talk about how they deal with things. And I grew up in a household where it's like you kind of keep the family business in the house. And when you have people in the house that don't have tools to deal with the family business, you don't learn those coping strategies. So, like I said, I do feel like a lot of people are just used to not using the words. They don't even know what to say in a lot of cases. So I'm not surprised by that, but it is extremely problematic. It's so maladaptive, and I'm just glad that we can have this conversation about it.
Oh, yeah, because it's so important to tackle things early on before it piles up and
Hmm.
become worse. So even if it's
Yeah.
not that bad in your eyes, this is the time to actually do something about it, right?
Hmm. Yeah, for
Especially
sure.
in kids.
Yeah, and I think too, I often equate it to like maintenance on a car. So it's best that
Mm.
you get an oil change before your car is completely out of oil, because then you do more damage to your vehicle. And a lot of people will make those steps like outside of their physical body and their mental health to do those preventative and maintenance type of measures, but they don't even really consider it for their mental health. And it's just really problematic. So when you don't have these tools, then you can't pass it down to your kids. And it's not, uncommon for us to see parents who struggle with mental health also having children who struggle with mental health concerns as well.
Right. And speaking of, what you just said, a lot of problems in kids can go unnoticed because in our upbringing, we all thought that kids will be kids, they'll grow out of it, they'll have to
Mhm.
figure it out on their own. So as a therapist, do you think that kids can really grow out of it?
I personally do not believe that children grow out of things. I do feel that with maturity, they may shift some of their behaviors. So when kids are young, you may see them externalize more. So you'll see the tantrums, you'll see the crying, you'll see the yelling and screaming, the non-compliance. They're like physically, they'll tell you, no, I don't want to do that, or, scream and yell. And those behaviors, as they get older, they don't maybe exhibit it in the same way, but it may transition to more internalizing problems where they want to control situations themselves. And so, especially in young girls, we'll see that with eating disorders. They want to control the situation, so they control what they eat. And that's a mental health concern that's very prominent, especially with young teens. And then with males, you may see it in where they withdraw. So emotionally, they're unable to communicate. But it looks different. And so I do think in some cases, parents may believe that their kids are growing out of phases, but you're still seeing the same behaviors in a different way. So it's something to be mindful of for sure.
Oh yeah, you just said a mouthful. So that's what it's true because just because the behavior changed doesn't mean they grew out of it. They're probably doing something
Mhm.
else to cope with it, and we may not notice
Sure.
it because we're not thought to think that way. And that's why a therapist would be very helpful, not just for the kids, but us as parents. We learn a lot from you guys as well when we bring in our kids. You tell us what
Yes.
behavioral change that we can do in order to help our kids. And sometimes it's things that we're doing that's making them react
Mhm.
this way as well. And we may not know it until you tell us.
Today, we're gonna be making a twice baked potato and potato skins.
Hey, Dad. I need your help asking Jessica to prom.
Of course.
Love is like the ocean. You have to tread the
Oh,
waters.
Dad, that's not the kind of help I needed. Hey, Jessica. Will you go to prom with me?
Yes.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care can't wait to share their first with you.
Looking at those areas of how you became who you became, and then looking at what were all the influxes that interfered with all of the stuff. We don't like to do that. That's too much work, Selena. Sometimes you have to take it in small pieces, in small fragments. You can't just run through it and say, okay, let's merrily do this work. It'll be fun. No, it's not fun work. It's painful. But we have to do it to get through it.
What would you say to parents that are concerned that their kids or their child will be nervous about coming to see you? Like, how should they approach the situation with their child? What should they say or not say to their kids before they come to see you?
One of the things that I feel parents can definitely do to kind of bridge that gap with kids is that they start going to therapy themselves and exhibiting a difference in their behavior. So a lot of times parents will say, do as I say, not as I do. And it's important that kids are watching and they're observing the behaviors that you're encouraging them to exhibit. So I would say to parents, if you want your child to go to therapy, you could engage in some sort of therapeutic relationship. It may not be a formal counselor or therapist, but maybe having someone that you go to and you kind of get guidance from and express to your child. And this is at many, as young ages as well. Kids understand a lot more than we give them credit for. So even if you were to tell them, like, I've been speaking to someone about how I've been feeling, mommy or daddy has been stressed, overwhelmed, frustrated, I'm hurt, especially maybe if you've lost a loved one with COVID, a lot of that's happening, or being away from people has been hard. And when we experience things as adults, we don't often express that to our kids. And so kind of letting them know, hey, this is how I've been feeling. You may be feeling like this too. And you know what really helps me? This is what helps mommy. If I go talk to somebody, do you want to try that, right? Do you want me to go with you even? And so I often, when parents come into my office, it's like we're all coming in. So we're having a conversation as a group. The child is not left to feel like they're the problem. They're the broken one that needs fixing. And I do feel that a lot of kids believe if I go to a therapist, it's because something's wrong with me. Like I'm the problem. And in some cases, that may be their behavior is problematic. But again, like we said earlier, it's environmental. So we have to consider what are some other things we could do in this environment to make the whole situation better. And having you come in and supporting your child, like literally physically being there with them, but also emotionally being available to them in that space, I think would be a great way to kind of bridge that gap so that kids aren't so nervous about it. And then there's YouTube. You can go on YouTube and look up videos on what therapy's like these days. I do think that representation matters. So when I'm working with families of color and they have young girls with natural hair and I come in with my natural hair, they're like, oh, okay, she's cool. Like, she's good. I can talk to her. And those little things make a big difference. Being able to use similar like slang, like terms that the kids use is also helpful when they're young, just because they do have a preconceived notion. But I think doing things like this, seeing doctors of different ethnicities and backgrounds across different fields helps kids have a different perspective on medical health and physical health and mental health as well.
Right. And the relatability aspect of it too. Because if I bring my son or my daughter to you, you look like them. So they automatically let their guards down a little bit, maybe not as much on the first visit, second visit, but they let their guards down because they feel that you can relate. And you really can relate because you have the same background. You probably have gone through the same struggles. You're probably raising Black kids. And so there is a level of relatability there. And that's super important. Because you can't go to a therapist that doesn't understand your background. That's not going to work. Yeah. at all.
I hear that
Yeah.
so much too from families where they oh, we've tried therapy, but maybe the therapist was of a different, nationality or a different race or ethnicity. And that's not to say there can't be a connection, but it can be more difficult. And we know if we allow children to be their innocent selves in a way, they honestly will tell us pretty early on how they feel about a situation. And so I do think it's important that we find a good fit, because when you're kind of making yourself emotionally vulnerable, it's almost like standing naked in front of somebody. When you have to go to therapy and talk about your feelings, you're emotionally naked. And for some children, that's extremely uncomfortable. Imagine how you would feel if you had to stand out, somewhere and just take all your clothes off. That's a very difficult experience to have. And so being able to not have to worry about not relating to the person is just one less struggle that kids don't have when they come to me, especially children of color, because we can just bypass that. And it's like, let's get into the issue. Like, why are we here? Like, what's the problem of the week? What's the problem of the moment? Type of thing. And they tend to like that. They're just like, girl, let me tell you what happened. I'm like, tell me.
And so they feel the layers and they open up to you because you know how to get them to do that, right?
Yeah.
Do you use play therapy? Like, what is play therapy?
So play therapy is specific, and we usually see play therapy with younger kids, but it's more so designed to have them act out what it is that they're feeling if they don't have the words. And so I don't necessarily use it in the more traditional sense, because I tend to work with older children that can use their words a little bit more. But I have worked in pediatric psychology offices where we've done more of the play therapy for our children that had autism and had difficulties with communicating, or other neurodevelopmental disorders as well. But play therapy is pretty specific to like puppets, dolls, like you're a lot of reenacting with other image or symbols and things. So it's helpful for young kids that don't have the words yet, or for those who may have experienced extreme trauma and they don't want to speak what it is that they have experienced too. So that that is also a great tool in that regard. But I use it in a different way. So I like to do a lot of drawing with my kids when they come in, or with my clients. And I see some adults and I do this with them as well. So it's like, we're doing timelines. We're kind of mapping out things. We're putting it on paper so that they can release that stress and that pressure from their brain. And it is really helpful for them, because in a lot of cases, we're carrying these thoughts around on a daily basis, right? But you kind of got to get it out. And so some people, they're really good at drawing, but they've never thought to use that for therapy. And so I try to incorporate that as much as I can, just so that they know that there are multiple outlets to kind of getting those emotions out of your brain, if you will, and expressing yourself. So definitely a great thing to consider, especially for the little people.
Right. And you said something about trauma, and that got me to thinking that, in our community, sometimes people think that trauma has to be something physical. Like, a lot of people don't realize that trauma doesn't have to be something insidious, but it could be, or it doesn't have to be something that happened to you. It could be anything that upsets somebody's ability to cope, right? Especially a kid.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And again, going back to the point I made earlier about us normalizing maladaptive behaviors, we don't often even know how to separate something being traumatic from like, oh, that's messed up. It's like, that's more than messed up. Like, that's a big deal. That's going to stay with you. And it's also going to impact your relationships, the way that you communicate and the way that you perceive the world moving forward. And so there's so much work to be done on trauma. As a culture, I think we have had to normalize trauma to survive, honestly. If you think about slavery, if you think about Jim Crow, all of those, and even nowadays, like, we're still in this, it's not completely gone. Microaggressions in society, those things are constantly traumatizing. When you're constantly being reminded of the trauma, it's easier to make it normalized so that you can survive. And what we have to do is get from surviving to thriving. Like, that's the goal, right? But in order to do that, we have to face it head on, more or less, allow ourselves to Yeah, for sure. Allow ourselves to recognize that was messed up. And I actually did not like when that happened to me, or when that was said to me, or when someone made me feel this way. But then a lot of people get stuck there, because it's, what do I do about that? And they don't have the tools, which is why therapy is so important. It gives you the tools to deal with the things you don't like, so that you don't continue to re-traumatize yourself and make it normal, because that's very problematic.
Right, right. And it normalizes things too. When you're introducing things to a child, it becomes normal to them. So maybe that's what we need
Hmm.
to start doing, is introducing therapy to children so that they grow up as a generation that think that therapy is normal, and they continue the trend of sending their kids to therapy. It's the same as, normalizing eating your vegetables. I mean, you can't start doing that as a teenager. It's going to be hard. But if you introducing
Yeah, for
that
sure.
as a baby and make it normal, then vegetables is just a normal part of a diet to a child that's growing up, if that's what they've been introduced to since they were little. Same thing with
No,
therapy.
for
So
sure.
yeah. How
I agree.
involved?
I would love to see more. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, say more. I want to hear what you have to say.
No, I was gonna say I would just love to see more participation at a younger age, and not for kids who are in crisis, like you said earlier. When you let it become a really big issue, of course they're not going to want to come to therapy. Then they've been struggling with this for a very long time. Same thing with education. When a kid has been struggling academically in first and second grade, they're not going to want to go to tutoring in ninth grade. They're done with school, like they're over it.
Yeah.
So it's the problem is much bigger at that point. And so starting young, when you see little things that you are concerned about as a parent, I think having good counsel allows you to determine whether or not you need to seek out other supports. And a lot of times, if we don't have good counsel, we don't know, if everyone around us, kids are acting the same way and they're all engaging in maladaptive behavior, we're going to think it's okay because all of our kids are doing the same thing. Sometimes it's helpful to have individuals around you who have different experiences so you can say, you know what, maybe I do need to get help with this. And then you have a resource that you can go to for those services, which is why I love these online platforms, because it makes content like this a lot more accessible to individuals and, kind of can start them on the right path. So I just wanted to throw that in there. We got to
Agreed.
get the young
Agreed.
kids in as early as possible.
This is the story of a boy who is very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help. And slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
As far as actually being a part of the fraternity versus wanting to be in the fraternity, would you say that your outlook on your environment is different?
Actually being in the organization now, you're exposed to everything.
This is the most serious thing that I have ever been a part of. When we say this is a serious matter, we are not playing.
How involved are parents in therapy if they're bringing in their kids? How involved are they?
I think it depends on the practice. Personally, like I said, for me, when I have children and it's of any age, if from the young kids, elementary age to high schoolers, I bring parents into all of my sessions because a lot of times when a child is going through something, right, they need support. If they want to confide in me and tell me something that's really difficult for them, I want them to get support because they're only going to see me for a short window of time in their life. The rest of their weeks and days are with their family, they're in school and other activities. And so it's not to say that I'm necessarily telling the parents what was told to me because of confidentiality, but I often make, not often, I always make the agreement with my clients that if this is something that is bigger than this session, that's bigger than this space of you and I, then we need to figure out what you feel better. You feel heard, you feel understood. You're like, oh, this is great. And then when you leave, you go back to your everyday. And if, if your everyday is the problem, then it's important that you have more allies. It can't just be your therapist. So I like to restore that confidence in the whole environment and that whole ecosystem, so everyone feels like they can participate. And then the child is able to actually thrive in other settings, because then you'll be in therapy every day. And that's not a way to live either. You don't want to be dependent on it. You want to have it as a resource, as a support system. So I make sure my parents are involved. I know that there are other practices where the parents drop the kid off and they pick them up. And I feel in those, with that model, it just depends, it just depends on what's going on. But for the teens, like, they struggle to communicate with their parents. And so I think it's a beautiful opportunity to actually teach them how to parent an older child that's going to soon be an adult, and how to foster that type of relationship so that they can continue to grow together, if that makes sense.
Right. So during therapy, you're able to tell if there's something going on in the ecosystem of the child, correct?
Yeah,
and if you
for sure.
That,
yes.
Then you communicate that with the parents and let the parents know, hey, this is what I'm thinking is going on. And so you're kind of counseling the parents as to how to change certain things to help the child be better or thrive.
Oh, yes, for sure. Okay. And I know I've had a lot of cases where maybe moms will come in and they'll say, oh, well, dad doesn't really believe in therapy, especially my Black and brown parents and clients. They're like, we don't, dad doesn't think this is necessary. But once they get in the office, I'm going down their whole trauma timeline. It's like, well, tell me when this happened to you. And then the dads are in there crying and they're getting their relief and they feel better. They're like, okay, this is good. Like, I understand. Like, I want to invest in this now, but they just have to know that it's worth it, right? And I hate that we have to sell that peace of mind. We have to sell that emotional release, but it's so uncommon in our community that it's almost like we have to market feeling better. We have to market someone wanting to get what they need. But therapy it's not cheap in some cases, right? So I'm self-pay. I don't take insurance. And even if you have insurance, there's co-pays associated with that. And so in some cases, it just may not be affordable for some clients, but there has been a big push. I've seen since COVID, a lot of celebrities who are dealing with mental illness or mental health concerns are funding opportunities that are more accessible to individuals in low-income communities who may not have the means to pay for therapy. And schools often will do things as well to kind of offset, but we know how many kids are in schools, right? So sometimes it does require stepping outside of those institutions and finding it on your own in private pay. But that can be difficult. So having, like I said, platforms like this, just sometimes to spark that conversation in a household can make a huge difference and at least put them on the right track. So maybe it won't be as expensive because you won't need to go every day. You can learn some tips at home and just incorporate those things on a daily basis just to manage, right, in between. But it can be quite expensive. And so I can understand why some people are even more intimidated by the idea, because it's like, oh, you just want to tell me I'm crazy and get my money. And it's like, no, I'm just telling you what's actually going on in your house. Like,
that's a mental thing we have to shift. It's a mentality thing that we have to shift, because it's an investment in your health. And just like you want to invest in your physical health, your mental health is also important. And it is the same for your children.
Yes.
Because you can't have physical health without having good mental health. So a lot of times we forget that. And so that's important. It's important to invest in yourself. You have to be whole from head to toe in order to be the best that you can be. And we always put that on the back burner. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll be all right. I don't need to exercise. I'll figure it out. I'll start with the New Year resolution. And then next thing you know, years go by and you don't do anything about it. So that's also a problem. But that's a shift in the mentality, and it's going to take a lot of work. But I'm glad, like you said, that we have platforms like this that can that are very accessible to a lot of people. I want to ask you, when it comes to a parent bringing their children into therapy, what's the commitment level? How soon should parents expect to see improvement? Because a lot of times they think 1 or 2 sessions will fix the problem. I don't think there's such a thing as a fix, but what's the commitment level that you're looking at?
It honestly is very different. I've had clients where it's like we kind of know we have a lot of work to do, and so we're going to get through it slowly. And it depends on how quickly you kind of spark that rapport, I feel, with the therapist. So if everyone coming into the conversation is willing to be an active participant, you can move very quickly. Because a lot of it is literally just, I need to say this. I've never said it before. I need to release this from my mind, and I can allow my body and the rest of my existence to move forward. But if we're holding these things in, then it makes it difficult to, just to kind of make the progress. So I will say it honestly just depends. The more honest you are, the more open and transparent everyone is to the experience, then you would want to expect to see results a lot faster. But, this isn't like, it's not a workout. This is a constant day to day. This is an everyday thing. And so you may be great, and then something traumatic happens. And now it's almost like you're starting over. But the thing we have to tell people is that's okay, right? Because you're not okay all the time. And that's fine because life happens, things occur all the time. And so it's just, I tell people, just give it a try. Be honest and give it a try.
Okay, awesome. So before I let you go, because we're almost at the end, I want to ask you to tell us what further advice you have for parents right now as they help their children cope with the trauma of current events that are going on in their lives, and also tell everyone how they can reach you and get in contact with you.
For sure. So when it comes to parents dealing with their children, I would say seek help first. Definitely get in good counsel, build a community around yourself as an individual, as an adult, where you're able to get what you need and you can deal with those childhood traumas that you probably have not resolved yet. That is going to open your eyes to different ways to actually be a model for your child, and it'll kind of set everything in the right direction. So that would be my biggest, takeaway and first step of action for parents. As far as me, you can find me on Instagram at being_Dr. G. I'm also on YouTube with my company, Reach AKG. We do videos for parents, educators working with children with disabilities and in high needs communities. So our YouTube channel is Reach AKG. And you can also go to our website, www.reachakg.org, and see all of the services that we offer.
Thank you so much. This was very helpful, insightful, and I appreciate you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so learning communication skills, especially when it comes to feelings and emotions, is already a heavy task for children. It is for all people. And for some people, it takes until they're adults to get the hang of it. And still, some never do. In our family with 3 kids, I realize that each child needs to be raised or managed differently to accommodate their personality. But even though I know this fact, that doesn't mean I know how to handle it. That's the whole there's no parenting handbook thing. Us parents, we're human, and so many times we just have to learn as we go. It can be easy to overlook that each personality understands and responds to situations differently. Some kids will bottle things up, others will cry, others will manifest anger or fear into jealousy or even be mean. When your kids go to therapy, you can ask the therapist how to deal with particular behavioral concerns. With your child's confidentiality in mind, the therapist can give you pointers on how to approach or even respond to problems. You can help your children practice the new skills they learn at home, things like coping, problem solving, or anything the therapist teaches you. Children also learn that mental health is just as important as physical health, and that's important. Taking care of our bodies is important, just as important as taking care of our minds. So when kids are introduced to the normalcy of therapy and talking about life's trouble early on, they establish a level of comfort with mental health, knowing that they deserve to feel mentally well. Also, through therapy, parents can learn how to approach their child's development with patience and compassion. When you understand the mechanics of why someone is acting the way they are, it's easier to shape your reaction with care and intention. Mental health plays a significant role in physical health when it comes to leading a long, comfortable, and healthy life, because 1 out of 5 adults suffers a form of mental illness. It's more common than we think, and the treatment is available. Your life matters, and your mental health does too. I hope this was informative and helpful. Thank you again for listening to the show. Until next time.
Looking at those areas of how you became who you became, and then looking at what were all the influxes that interfered with all of the stuff. We don't like to do that. That's too much work, Selena. Sometimes you have to take it in small pieces, in small fragments. You can't just run through it and say, okay, let's merrily do this work. It'll be fun. No, it's not fun work. It's painful. But we have to do it to get through it.